His wife kicked him out and marry his best friend after he lost his job. What he did next makes her scream. You can't even keep a job, James. How could you ever keep a woman like me? You're nothing but a failure now. Sign the papers. This house is mine, and Daniel is everything you'll never be. Those were the venom-laced words Rebecca hurled at her husband, her hand gripping his best friend's waist as she kicked him out of his own home. She didn't know the man driving away in silence was already preparing a legal strike so devastating it would strip her of everything. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about love, betrayal, loyalty, and payback. Tell me, viewers, if you discovered your spouse betrayed you with your best friend, would you walk away quietly, or let them taste the full weight of justice? The front door swung open with a soft click, and James Carter stepped into the hush of his Dallas home. The air smelled faintly of candle wax and expensive wine. He loosened his tie as the fading sun cut stripes of light across the hallway floor. For once, he was early. From the living room came the sound of laughter, Rebecca's voice, rich, sharp, carried by the clink of glass. James paused, one hand resting against the wall, listening. I swear, she said, words curling around the rim of her wineglass, if it weren't for that paycheck, I'd have left him already. Daniel is everything James isn't. Bold, confident, exciting. My husband? He's boring and ordinary. The words sliced through the house like a blade. James froze where he stood. The briefcase in his hand suddenly felt heavier, pulling at his arm as if the weight of her contempt had settled inside it. He could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, every small sound magnified by the silence pressing against him. Rebecca's laughter rose again, cruel and careless, the sound of a woman who thought herself unseen. Sometimes I wonder what I'm still doing here, she added, her tone low but sharp enough to wound. Daniel makes me feel like a woman. James closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in a slow breath, steadying the storm that threatened to spill across his face. His knuckles whitened around the handle of the briefcase until the leather creaked. He didn't step forward. He didn't announce himself. He didn't confront her in a burst of anger, though his chest burned for it. Instead, he turned quietly, retracing his steps through the hallway. His shoes made no sound on the polished floor. Out on the driveway, the evening air was cool against his skin. He lowered himself into the driver's seat of his car and sat in the growing dark, hands gripping the wheel, eyes fixed on nothing. She thought he was powerless. She thought his worth ended with a paycheck. She thought Daniel was her future. The reflection in the windshield caught his gaze. His own eyes, hard and steady now, no longer dulled by routine. The car rolled to a stop in the driveway. James killed the engine and sat still, the cool leather of the steering wheel firm beneath his palms. Rebecca's laughter from inside the house had carved something into him that would never fade. He stepped out, the slam of the door a muffled echo in the night, and carried his briefcase and walked into the house as if nothing in the world had shifted. Rebecca was in the kitchen, her hair pinned neatly, silk blouse catching the warm glow of the lights. She looked up, her smile automatic. You're home early. James returned it with ease. Traffic was kind tonight. He set his briefcase by the counter, washed his hands and rolled up his sleeves. Smells good? She gestured toward the dining room where the table was already set. Steak rested on porcelain, vegetables arranged with care, a bottle of red breathing at the center. It was the picture of domestic comfort. They sat together. Rebecca filled his glass and lifted her own, her laughter quick and light as she described a neighbor's misstep at the grocery store. James listened, nodding in all the right places, asking gentle questions, letting her voice fill the room. His eyes, steady and unreadable, lingered on her hands, her smile, the curve of her neck as she leaned back in her chair. When she asked about his day, he told her only what she expected to hear. Meetings, reports, nothing remarkable. His tone carried the rhythm of routine. She never saw the calculation behind it. After dinner, James cleared the plates, washed them carefully, and dried each glass before placing it back in the cabinet. Rebecca slipped off her heels and lounged on the sofa, scrolling her phone. The glow lit her face, and for a moment, James saw it again. The shadow of longing, the name of another man flickering behind her eyes. She tilted the screen away when she sensed him glance, then looked up with practiced warmth. "You didn't touch your wine," she said. "Wasn't in the mood." He folded the towel, placed it neatly on the counter, and joined her in the living room. They watched the news together, her body angled just slightly away from his. James wrapped an arm gently around her shoulders, pulling her closer as if nothing were amiss. She leaned in enough to keep the image intact. To anyone else, they would look like the perfect couple winding down after a long day. Inside, James counted every small betrayal. The sigh when she thought he wasn't listening, the quick flick of her thumb across the phone screen, the hollowness in her laugh when he spoke. When the hour grew late, they climbed the stairs together. Rebecca slipped beneath the sheets and turned toward the wall. James lay beside her, his breathing even, his face calm in the dark. She believed she was married to a man too ordinary to notice. But James was awake, his eyes open, staring into the blackness, already setting the first pieces of his test into place. Rebecca's breathing had steadied into sleep long before James closed his eyes. He lay awake, watching the dark ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioner and the occasional car sliding down the street outside. At some point his body gave way and the night carried him off. By morning, the rhythm of life returned, coffee dripping in the kitchen, the scent of toast. Rebecca in a silk robe gliding between counters with a phone pressed to her ear. She gave him a smile when he entered, kissed his cheek and poured his cup just the way he liked it. "Don't be late tonight," she said lightly, tapping the phone screen. "We're having dinner with Claire and Matt." "I won't," James replied, straightening his tie. His voice was steady, his expression calm. The day stretched long, filled with quiet storms of its own. And when James came home that evening, he carried something more than his briefcase. Rebecca greeted him at the door, kissed him again, then noticed the envelope in his hand. "What's that?" she asked, her tone curious but careless. James set it on the table, loosened his tie, and said only, "I lost my job." She slid the letter out, eyes scanning line by line. Her fingers stilled halfway down the page. "You've been fired?" James sank into the chair, exhaustion etched into his movements. "Budget cuts. My position was one of them." Rebecca lowered herself slowly as if her knees had lost strength. For a moment she was silent, staring at the page. Then she let out a soft laugh, the kind that tried to smooth sharp edges. "These companies, no loyalty anymore. You gave them years." He looked at her, searching her eyes. "We'll be fine," he said evenly. "It won't take long to find something else." She reached for his hand across the table. Her smile flickered, gentle, but her pulse thudded against his knuckles. "Of course we'll be fine." That night she cooked his favorite meal, roast chicken, seasoned perfectly with red wine poured into gleaming glasses. She set the table with linen napkins and lit 2 tall candles. Everything about the picture spoke of devotion. But James noticed the way she ate little, pushing food around her plate. He noticed her phone buzzing twice on the counter, and how she ignored it with too much effort. He noticed the silence stretching long after the plates were cleared. Later, when they sat side by side on the sofa, Rebecca leaned against him. Her head rested on his shoulder, but her body carried a stiffness she couldn't hide. James wrapped an arm around her anyway, warm and steady, the role of the perfect husband intact. He kissed her hair and whispered, "We'll get through this." Her eyes closed, but no words followed. In the quiet, James could feel the first crack forming beneath the surface of her mask, small but undeniable, like a fracture running through glass. The days that followed carried the shape of routine, but the rhythm was broken. Rebecca still laid out his coffee in the mornings, still kissed his cheek at the door, but there was a tightness to her movements, a carefulness in her voice that had not been there before. James rose early, dressed as though work still called him, and left the house with his briefcase. He spent the mornings in quiet spaces, libraries, hotel lobbies, cafes, reviewing documents and thinking through his next steps. To Rebecca, it looked like job hunting. To James, it was observation. Every evening he returned at the same hour, carrying the calm weight of a man who understood patience. One night the dinner table was set, but her mood was brittle. She moved quickly between stove and counter, her size sharp, the plates hitting the wood harder than they should have. James sat quietly, watching the small cracks widen. "Did you hear back from anywhere today?" she asked, eyes fixed on the pan in front of her. "Not yet," James replied, steady as stone. She gave a thin smile, poured the food onto his plate, and joined him. They ate in silence. Halfway through, Rebecca pushed her fork aside. "It's been weeks," she said, her voice low, more to herself than to him. "People don't just bounce back from this." James lifted his glass. "I've never failed to provide for us, that won't change." Her gaze lingered on him, searching, but she said nothing more. By the second week, her evenings grew longer. She claimed errands, visits with friends, last-minute appointments. James noted each one without comment. He filled the hours with quiet routines, reading, cooking for himself, walking the garden paths. The house echoed with absence. On a Friday night, Rebecca returned late, perfume clinging to her clothes that wasn't hers. James was waiting in the living room with a book in his lap. She startled slightly at the sight of him. "You're up," she said quickly, setting her purse down. "I was reading." He closed the book gently. "Did you eat?" "Yes," she answered too fast. Then, softening her tone, she leaned down and kissed his cheek. "Don't stay up too late." He watched her climb the stairs, each step carrying distance with it. By the third week, her patience had worn thin. That Monday morning she moved through the kitchen with clipped efficiency, dropping his mug on the counter with a thud. "You can't just sit around waiting for something to happen, James," she snapped, her back to him. "I'm not sitting around," he said, but his tone remained calm. She shook her head, her hair catching the light, frustration sharp in the set of her shoulders. "You've lost your edge. You're too comfortable being nothing." James folded the newspaper neatly, rose, and kissed her temple before leaving the room. Her body stiffened under his touch. The fracture in her mask was no longer small. It was spreading, and she didn't care if he saw it. The morning light spilled across the dining table, soft and golden, but the house felt cold. Rebecca sat with her phone in hand, thumb moving across the screen, her lips set in a thin line. She didn't look up when James entered the kitchen. He poured his coffee, the steam rising, and took his seat opposite her. "You're quiet today," he said gently. She slipped the phone face down on the table, offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just tired." He kissed her at the forehead before leaving the house. The sun was sinking when James turned the corner onto his street. The sky glowed orange against the rooftops, and his headlights swept across the familiar driveway. He slowed as the beam caught something unusual by the door, two dark suitcases standing upright like sentries. His chest tightened. He cut the engine, stepped out, and the air carried a strange stillness. The suitcases were his, every zipper pulled, every tag in place. The door opened before he reached it. Rebecca stood there, framed in the porch light, her hair perfectly brushed, her face set hard. An envelope rested in her hand. "You're back," she said flatly, as though she had been waiting. She held the papers out to him. "Sign." James looked at the envelope, then at the bags beside him. His voice was quiet. "What is this?" "Divorce," she replied. Her eyes didn't waver. "You can't keep a job, James. How can you keep a woman? This house is mine now. Just sign the papers and leave." The words landed with practiced cruelty. He took the pen and signed. James bent, gripped the handle of the nearest suitcase, and lifted it into the trunk of his car. The metal latch clicked as he lowered it in place. Behind him, the sound of the kitchen door opening. Daniel stepped into the porch light, shirt loose, collar open, his expression smug. He walked forward, slipped an arm around Rebecca's waist, and kissed the side of her head. "Tough break, buddy," Daniel said, his grin wide. Rebecca leaned against him, her laughter sharp, cutting into the evening air. "At least now I have a real man." James closed the trunk with steady hands. He walked back for the second suitcase, his face unreadable, his movements deliberate. Rebecca's perfume drifted on the breeze, Daniel's chuckle low and triumphant. The case settled beside the first. James shut the trunk again, climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine purred to life. He reversed down the driveway slowly, headlights washing over the porch one last time. Rebecca clung tighter to Daniel, her smile brittle but defiant. James shifted into drive. The house shrank in the rearview mirror until it disappeared into the deepening dusk. The road stretched quiet beneath the headlights, mile after mile of darkness swallowing the city behind him. James drove without music, without distraction, his face calm, his pulse steady. The suitcases thudded gently in the trunk whenever he turned, the last relics of a home that was no longer his. He didn't stop at a motel. He turned off onto a gated drive lined with tall oaks, the iron fence swinging open at his command. Beyond it rose a mansion of stone and glass, silent and waiting. The lights flickered on as he entered, casting warmth over polished floors and wide windows. James set the suitcases down just inside the door. The echo of their weight carried through the empty halls. He walked deeper into the house, his shoes clicking softly, past the art-lined walls and into a study paneled in dark wood. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching the lamplight, and lowered into the leather chair behind a desk that had once belonged to his father. The betrayal was complete now. Rebecca had chosen Daniel, and she had done it with open scorn. James let the glass rest against his lips but didn't drink. He stared instead at the fireless hearth, his reflection faint in the glass cabinet across the room. He reached for the phone. The dial tone hummed once before a familiar voice answered. "Richard," he said when the line picked up, his tone even. "Meet me at the Northwood estate Monday morning." The voice on the other end was crisp. "Understood. What are we filing?" "A suit," James replied. He leaned back in the chair, eyes fixed on the unlit fireplace. "Attempted seizure of trust property. She served me papers and tried to claim the house. I'll have the documents ready." James ended the call and set the phone down. He rose, crossed to the tall windows, and drew the curtain aside. Beyond the lawn, the city shimmered faintly on the horizon, a sprawl of lights where Rebecca now rested in Daniel's arms, smug and secure in what she believed she had gained. He picked up the glass, took a slow sip, and let the burn roll down his throat. Then he spoke into the silence, his voice low, final. "She has no idea." The room absorbed the words. James finished the drink, set the empty glass back on the desk, and closed the curtains tight. Monday would begin the process. And when it was finished, Rebecca would stand in a courtroom stripped of everything she thought she had taken. James switched off the lamp, leaving the study in darkness. Upstairs, the mansion waited, vast and quiet, a world Rebecca had never touched and never would. Morning light poured through the tall windows of Northwood, touching the polished wood floors and painting the study in amber. James stood at the desk in a tailored jacket, shoulders square, as Richard arranged thick folders before him. The lawyer's pen clicked once, sharp against the silence. "Her petition is worthless," Richard said, tapping the first page. "The marital house belongs to the trust. Always has. What she filed is fraud by misrepresentation. We'll hit her with damages." James turned the pages slowly, his hand steady, his eyes cold. The neat black letters carried weight, but none heavier than the signature line at the bottom. He pressed the pen to paper and wrote his name. "File it," he said. Richard nodded, gathering the sheets. 7 days. By next week, she'll have a summons at her door. James leaned back, watching the sunlight stretch across the desk. And Daniel? The lawyer slid a separate file toward him. He works for you, though he doesn't know it. Employment records are in order. Termination can be processed immediately. Misconduct, negligence. I'll prepare it so the letter hits the same day as hers. James's lips barely moved. Perfect. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. You've hidden this well. Even she never guessed. James rose and walked to the window. Outside, the oaks swayed lightly, the lawn rolling green toward the gates. His reflection stood tall in the glass layered over the world beyond. My father trusted too easily, he said at last. He let managers and friends run his empire into the ground. One mistake after another until there was nothing left. His voice was low, measured, a man reciting scripture carved into his bones. I promised myself I'd never repeat it. That's why every asset sits behind a trust. That's why I walk the floor like any other employee. They see a man with a paycheck. They never see the one signing theirs. Richard closed the briefcase, snapping the locks. She'll regret thinking you were ordinary. She already does, James murmured. He turned back to the desk, poured 2 fingers of whiskey and let the glass rest in his palm. Rebecca thought she had traded up. Her husband for his best friend, his home for her security. Daniel thought he had stepped into another man's life without cost. Neither of them knew the ground they stood on belonged to James, every inch of it bound tight in iron law. Serve them together, he said finally. She at the house, him at his desk. Richard's eyes flicked up, meeting James's. The same hour? James nodded once. The same hour. The lawyer carried the briefcase out, his footsteps fading down the marble hall until the great door shut. Silence filled the mansion again. James stood at the window with his glass, watching the city glitter far away. Somewhere in that maze of streets, Rebecca and Daniel celebrated what they thought was victory. He drank slowly, the fire settling in his chest, and whispered to the empty room. 7 days later, the doorbell rang sharp and unforgiving. The courier's shoes clicked against the stone steps, the envelope crisp and white in his hand. Rebecca opened the door with a careless smile, signed without looking, and shut it again with a flick of her wrist. She tore the flap open as she crossed the hallway, her robe trailing behind her. Her eyes ran the first line, then stopped. The smile fell from her face. She read slower, lips moving, color draining from her skin. Fraudulent claim. Trust property. Damages pending. At the bottom, in heavy black ink, the seal of Richard Associates, attorneys at law, stamped clear beside the signature of counsel. The letter slipped from her hand. It scattered across the marble, pages splaying wide. She staggered back, clutching the wall for balance. Daniel came down the stairs, cufflinks in hand, his shirt open at the collar. What now? He asked, irritation in his voice. Rebecca thrust the papers at him with shaking fingers. Read. He scanned quickly, jaw tightening, his breath shortening as he reached the signature block. Filed by Richard Associates on behalf of... His voice faltered. He gripped the page tighter. The Northwood Trust. Rebecca's voice cracked. The house isn't mine. It never was. Rebecca slid down the wall, robe pooling around her. She gathered the lawsuit papers against her chest as if pressing them tighter might change their truth. A scream ripped from her throat, raw and piercing, echoing up the staircase and out through the open windows. The neighbors on the sidewalk stopped mid-step, heads turning. Curtains shifted. Whispers rose. Inside, Rebecca's world had already collapsed. At the office, Daniel's day began with a message. Report to HR at 10 a.m. He walked the hall with casual steps, unaware of the weight waiting for him. Colleagues nodded as he passed, the glass walls of offices reflecting his stride. Inside the HR suite, 2 managers sat across the polished table. A single envelope rested between them. Daniel, one of them said evenly, your employment has been terminated, effective immediately. The letter slid across the desk. He snatched it up, eyes racing through the lines. Termination of employment. Effective immediately. Signed by the Human Resources Department. His breath caught in his throat. This must be a mistake, he stammered. The managers' faces remained impassive. Your access has already been revoked. Security will escort you to collect your belongings. Daniel's chair scraped hard against the floor as he stood. He tried his badge at the side door on the way out. Access denied flashed red across the screen. 2 guards appeared, one at each side, silent and steady, guiding him through the open office. Every head turned. Screens froze. Conversations hushed. Daniel clutched the letter in his fist, eyes darting, sweat shining at his temple. He muttered under his breath, half curse, half disbelief, as the glass doors closed behind him. Weeks passed before the hearing date arrived. On the morning of trial, the courthouse was alive with whispers, reporters scratching notes, neighbors crowding the benches. The weight of scandal had drawn them all here. Rebecca Langford entered first, navy suit tailored to perfection, chin lifted as though dignity alone could carry her. Daniel followed, his jaw tight, his eyes sunken. They sat side by side at the defense table, their hands entwined in a nervous grip. The bailiff's voice thundered through the chamber. All rise. The double doors swung open. James entered, flanked by Richard, his lawyer. He carried no briefcase, no stack of files, only a steady calm that turned heads as he passed. His suit was charcoal, immaculate, his expression unreadable. Gasps stirred the benches as whispers rippled. That's him. The judge settled in, spectacles perched low. Case number 2147, the Northwood Trust versus Rebecca Langford. Richard stood. Your Honor, the plaintiff seeks relief against fraudulent claims brought by the defendant. Mrs. Langford attempted to seize property belonging to the Northwood Trust, a trust established years before the marriage. The evidence will show her claims are not only baseless but malicious. Rebecca's lawyer rose in turn, voice slick and practiced. Your Honor, my client acted as any wife would. She was led to believe she lived in a marital home, built from shared income. She was misled by a man who concealed his wealth, his position, and his very identity. If anyone has been defrauded, it is Mrs. Langford. The judge raised a brow, tapped his gavel once. We will hear testimony. Mr. Carter, you will take the stand in the next session. Mrs. Langford, you will also be sworn. The tension thickened instantly. Rebecca's nails dug into Daniel's hand. James sat motionless, eyes forward, his calm unbroken. The judge glanced over the docket. Opening arguments are concluded. This court is adjourned. Witness testimony will resume in 3 days. The gavel struck. The crowd erupted into murmurs as the session adjourned. 3 days later, the courtroom buzzed. Every seat filled, the aisles lined with murmurs. The bailiff's command brought silence. All rise. The judge entered, robes sweeping, and the trial resumed. Mr. Carter, take the stand. James rose, walked with calm precision to the witness box, and placed his hand on the Bible. The clerk's voice was firm. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do, James replied. He sat, posture straight, hands folded neatly. Richard approached first. Mr. Carter, please state your role in relation to the Northwood Trust. I am its trustee and beneficiary, James said evenly. The trust was established before my marriage to Mrs. Langford. Every property, including the home in question, is protected under that structure. It was never marital property. Richard nodded. Why live as though you were an ordinary employee? James's eyes swept the courtroom once before returning to the lawyer. My father lost everything because he trusted too easily. He let people manage his fortune without oversight. I swore not to repeat it. So I worked within my own company, quietly, to see people as they are, not as they act before power. It gave me clarity. It gave me truth. Murmurs rippled through the benches. Rebecca's jaw clenched, her knuckles white against the defense table. Cross-examination followed. Her lawyer rose quickly. Mr. Carter, isn't it true that by hiding your identity, you deceived your wife? That you let her believe she was married to a man with nothing? James's reply was calm. I gave her a home. I gave her loyalty. What she chose to do with it revealed more about her than about me. The lawyer pressed harder. So you admit you misled her? No, James said firmly. I tested her, and she failed. Gasps echoed. The lawyer faltered, then sat, defeated. Mrs. Langford, take the stand, the judge ordered. Rebecca rose, trembling slightly, but lifted her chin as she placed her hand on the Bible. I do, she whispered. Her lawyer guided her. Rebecca, tell the court why you believe the house was yours. Tears welled at her eyes. I lived there. I made it a home. I thought it was built from his income, from our marriage. Her voice cracked. He hid everything from me. Richard stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Langford, isn't it true that before this filing you told Mr. Carter you no longer wanted him? That you mocked him for losing his job? Rebecca's face blanched. I was angry. Isn't it also true you entered into a relationship with his best friend, Mr. Harlow, while still married to him? The courtroom gasped. Rebecca shifted in her seat, eyes flashing to Daniel. That's not... Answer the question, Richard pressed. Her shoulders sagged. Yes, she whispered. The judge leaned forward, voice heavy with finality. The court finds that all claims by the defendant are void. The Northwood Trust remains intact. Mrs. Langford is liable for damages and costs. Rebecca's scream ripped through the chamber, raw and guttural, her dignity shattering in front of the crowd. Daniel lowered his head, shame burning through him. James stood from the box, buttoned his jacket, and walked calmly toward the doors. The gavel struck once more, but he didn't look back. Outside, the sun blazed bright against the courthouse steps. James descended them slowly, each step the quiet proof of a man who had lost nothing, and a woman who had lost everything. Did Rebecca deserve everything that happened to her? Would you have forgiven her if you were in James's shoes? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting and true-to-life stories.